Have you ever felt completely betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you? I have, and nothing prepares you for the moment when family turns on you in front of everyone you know. I still remember the exact look on my father's face that night. Cold, calculated, like I was nothing more than a pawn in some twisted game he had been playing for years. I had worked for that penthouse, saved every dollar, sacrificed every weekend, every late night, just to build something for myself. And he wanted me to hand it over to my brother, who had done nothing, earned nothing, yet somehow always seemed to be the favorite. It was my sister's wedding, the kind of extravagant affair that people post about on social media with perfect filters and fake smiles. I arrived in my own car, a modest gesture compared to some of the limousines in the driveway, but it was mine, bought with my sweat and late nights. My father's eyes zeroed in on me the second I stepped into the ballroom. I could feel the tension radiating off him, his grip on the leather strap of his champagne glass tightening. "Hand over the penthouse to your brother," he said. The words echoed across the room, and for a moment I thought I had misheard him. I laughed nervously. "Excuse me?" I asked. My voice wavered, not because I was afraid, but because disbelief had a way of stealing your breath. He stepped closer, face red, vein throbbing in his temple, and slapped me. Right there in front of 200 guests. Family, friends, business associates. The sound of it resonated in my chest long after his hand left my face. I could feel the stares, the gasps, the whispers. People were shocked, some concerned, some entertained by the drama. But I didn't flinch. I took a deep breath, wiped my cheek, and looked him straight in the eyes. "You are wrong," I said calmly. "I earned everything I have, and no one has the right to take it from me." My father scoffed, turning his attention to my brother, who was standing there with that smug half-smile, completely unaware of the storm about to hit him. "Your father is right," he said, trying to insert himself into the moment, but I ignored him. I had learned long ago that people like him only get power if you let them. The rest of the evening was a blur. I stayed pretending to be composed, making small talk, smiling when required. But inside, something had shifted. That slap, that humiliation, it became fuel. For weeks, I plotted quietly, meticulously, making sure no one noticed that I was planning the quietest, most devastating revenge they could imagine. It started with the business side of my life. My father had always been a networker, proud of his connections. I began reaching out to some of his most influential contacts, the people who really mattered in our small but tightly knit city. I didn't tell them about the slap or the penthouse. I didn't need to. I simply showed them my capabilities, my resilience, my intelligence. People who had previously dismissed me as the lesser child suddenly began inviting me to meetings, to collaborations, to opportunities I never thought I would touch. Meanwhile, I made sure to quietly document everything about the penthouse. Legal documents, purchase agreements, all the details that proved beyond doubt that the property was mine. My father had always assumed that family loyalty would ensure I gave it up willingly, but he underestimated one thing. I was no longer the scared, obedient child I once was. I had learned that power belongs to those who are prepared to defend it. Weeks passed, and the tension at home grew. My father began making subtle threats, trying to intimidate me into compliance, but I ignored them. I was patient, waiting for the perfect moment to act. I didn't want a public spectacle. I wanted something that would hit where it hurt most. His ego, the one that had convinced him that I could be bullied into submission. And then came the opportunity. My father had been planning to sell a portion of his business, using connections that he thought were loyal. I knew the right person, someone he trusted, someone whose opinion he valued more than mine. I reached out, casually, professionally, and planted the seeds of doubt. Questions about trust, integrity, management style, subtle, barely noticeable to anyone but lethal in effect. Within weeks, the sale was put on hold. Negotiations paused, and my father's confidence visibly cracked. He had no idea that his own daughter had undermined his plans. Silently, methodically, without anyone realizing it. Around the same time, I decided to confront my brother. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse. I simply asked in a quiet voice if he remembered the wedding night, the way our father had treated me. I watched his face change from smug amusement to discomfort, and I continued. "You have a choice," I said. "You can either continue to follow him blindly, or you can acknowledge that I earned my life, my property, my respect. And if you want to be part of it, you need to step aside." He laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. But I could see it, the realization that I was serious, that I was no longer someone to underestimate. I had watched him for years, waited for the right moment, and now it had come. I didn't need to fight him. I only needed to assert the truth, and the weight of that truth was enough to make him retreat. The final act was subtle but perfect. I went to the notary, confirmed every document, every agreement, and made sure the ownership of the penthouse was legally undeniable. Then I sent a simple email to my father and brother, attaching copies of the documents. No words, just proof. I wanted them to see it, to feel it, to understand that their attempts to humiliate me had failed spectacularly. The reactions were priceless. My father called me repeatedly, trying to negotiate, to threaten, to guilt me. I listened patiently, responding calmly, reminding him of the facts, reminding him that respect is earned, not demanded. My brother tried to argue, to appeal to loyalty, but loyalty has limits when it is built on fear and favoritism. Months later, at a family gathering, I walked into the room carrying myself with quiet confidence. Everyone noticed the shift. My mother, who had always favored my brother, now looked at me with something approaching caution. My father, proud but frustrated, avoided my gaze. And my brother, well, he looked smaller somehow, diminished by the knowledge that I had outmaneuvered him in the most elegant way possible. I never gloated. I never made a scene. I simply existed, calm, composed, unstoppable. And it was enough. People began seeing me for who I truly was. Not the lesser child, not the one to be dismissed, but a woman capable of standing up for herself, capable of turning humiliation into power. And the best part? My children saw it too. They saw their mother, wronged, dismissed, slapped in front of hundreds, rise above it all and claim what was rightfully hers. They learned a lesson that no school could ever teach, that life will throw betrayal, humiliation, and injustice your way, but the ultimate victory is to reclaim your power quietly, confidently, and legally. In the end, my father never got the penthouse. My brother never received a single thing that was not earned, and I walked through my life with my head high, my children beside me, and the knowledge that some victories are silent, slow, and irreversible. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply to rise, untouched, above the people who once thought they could break you, and to never look back. The weeks after I sent those documents were intoxicating, not because of the victory itself, but because I realized just how fragile the world my family had, built around power and fear, really was. I had quietly dismantled it, piece by piece, without raising my voice, without making a scene. My father, the man who had ruled our family with intimidation and selective favoritism, was suddenly forced to see me as an equal, or at least someone who could no longer be dismissed. He tried subtle manipulations first, sending messages that pretended to be conciliatory. "We need to talk for the sake of the family," one text read. I read it once, smiled, and deleted it. For the first time, I realized that their power over me had always been an illusion. They had relied on fear and guilt, but I had stripped both from their arsenal. I did not respond. I did not negotiate. I waited. My brother, on the other hand, became a shadow of himself. He had always been cocky, the golden child, the one who thought everything would slide his way. Now he avoided my calls, my texts, even eye contact at family gatherings.
He was learning, the hard way, that life does not reward entitlement. That night at our mother's birthday party, he nearly spilled wine on himself in his nervous haste to leave the room when I entered. I did not gloat, I simply watched, knowing that the satisfaction of seeing him squirm in real time was worth more than any words. The next challenge came unexpectedly. My father, in a last-ditch attempt to regain control, tried to convince my mother to intervene. He whispered to her behind closed doors, painting me as reckless, ungrateful, and greedy. I could hear the muffled tones through the walls, but I did not react. I had learned long ago that arguing in secret only feeds their sense of control. Instead, I prepared for the confrontation openly. I scheduled a dinner under the guise of reconciliation. The three of us sat around the table, the air thick with tension. I poured wine for myself but left their glasses empty, a silent signal that I was in charge of the rhythm now. My father started with his usual theatrics, gesturing wildly, trying to charm my mother into siding with him. I waited until he paused, then I leaned forward and spoke slowly. "This is not about greed. This is about respect. You have underestimated me for years, but I'm not the child you once thought I was. Everything I have, I earned. Every penny, every decision, every achievement. And I will not allow that to be undermined by favoritism or threats." My mother's eyes shifted between us, guilt flickering in her expression. She had always been more cautious than my father, more empathetic, yet she had allowed herself to be complicit in his games. I continued, voice calm but unwavering. "You can no longer control me with fear. You can no longer dictate what I am worth. If you want to maintain any relationship with me, it will be on mutual respect, not coercion." There was silence after that. For the first time, my father seemed genuinely uncertain, the kind of uncertainty that is more dangerous than rage because it forces reflection. My mother did not interrupt. She simply watched, realizing perhaps for the first time that I was no longer the frightened child who would accept whatever humiliation came my way. Then came my brother's final act of weakness. He attempted to undermine me at work, contacting one of my business partners, trying to sow doubt about my character. But by now, I had fortified my reputation, built networks of trust, and cultivated allies who had my back. His efforts were not only ineffective, they backfired spectacularly. My partner called me immediately, apologetic, explaining the bizarre conversation and reaffirming our agreement. I felt a flicker of satisfaction. It was small, subtle, but it confirmed that my careful planning was working in every dimension. Months passed, and the tension at home became almost comical. My father tried everything: subtle threats, dramatic sighs, even public displays of outrage at gatherings, but nothing rattled me. I had become untouchable in the only way that mattered, mentally and legally. I knew my boundaries, I knew my rights, and I refused to allow anyone to violate them. The penthouse itself became a symbol of my victory, not just a property but a testament to perseverance. I spent evenings there, overlooking the city skyline, thinking about how far I had come. Every corner, every fixture, every detail reminded me that I had fought for this, not because I wanted to flaunt it, but because it represented my autonomy, my refusal to be diminished. And then came the twist I had not anticipated. My father's own business associates began reaching out to me directly, curious, cautious, yet respectful. They had seen the shift in power, the way he could no longer manipulate his own family, and they wanted to understand the woman who had achieved this. Meetings were arranged, deals discussed, opportunities opened up that had never been available to me before. It was a strange irony: by standing my ground against my family, I had earned recognition and respect in the world outside. My father tried to maintain control in other ways, involving lawyers, questioning my every move, but every attempt was easily countered. I had anticipated them, had consulted experts quietly, prepared contingency plans. It was like playing chess in a room where my opponents thought it was checkers. They were always one step behind, always reacting, never anticipating. Meanwhile, my brother descended into bitterness. He had always relied on others to carve his path, and now he had no one. His attempts to compete with me financially, socially, and emotionally all failed. He became withdrawn, silent at gatherings, reluctant to speak. It was almost tragic, watching someone who once believed the world owed him everything slowly realize the limits of entitlement. Even my mother began to change. She approached me cautiously one evening, bringing a gift, awkwardly placing it in my hands. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you," she whispered. It was tentative, strained yet sincere. I accepted it without comment, nodding. Years of hurt could not be erased with a single gesture, but it was a start. I realized then that some victories are not just about revenge, they are about reclaiming your life and redefining relationships on your terms. I maintained the penthouse, hosted gatherings, and invited friends who truly mattered. I built a life that was undeniably mine, free from manipulation and false pretenses. Every time my father called, I answered calmly, refusing to be baited. Every interaction with my brother was polite but distant, boundaries firmly in place. I had created an environment where respect was earned, not demanded. The culmination of all this came one quiet evening. I had invited my closest allies to a small dinner at the penthouse, celebrating a successful deal I had just closed. My father called, the line buzzing insistently. I let it ring. He left messages, frantic, pleading, even threatening once, but I ignored them. I had learned that power lies not in reacting to chaos but in maintaining your composure while the storm rages around you. Later, my brother tried to approach me in private, words fumbling, attempts to negotiate a truce. I listened politely, then shook my head. There is no negotiation when the truth is this clear, I said. I have earned my place, and it is not up for debate. His face fell, realizing that the bridge had been burned not in anger, but through clarity and principle. Months turned into a year, and the family dynamics shifted irrevocably. My father had no choice but to accept that I was independent, strong, and unyielding. My brother had learned humility the hard way, and me? I had become someone unrecognizable to those who had tried to belittle me, yet deeply familiar to myself. I had proven that resilience, patience, and strategic action could rewrite destinies even in the most hostile environments. The ultimate lesson was clear. Revenge is not about spectacle. It is about reclaiming agency, restoring dignity, and building a future where those who tried to diminish you cannot touch you again. I walked through life knowing that the power of calm, calculated action is far greater than anger or rash decisions. And the final, haunting realization? Sometimes, the people who try to break you the most are the ones who make your rise inevitable. Without their betrayal, without their underestimation, without their arrogance, I might never have discovered the depths of my own strength, the clarity of my vision, and the unshakable foundation I now stand upon. I had taken what was mine, legally and ethically, but more than that, I had taken control of my life, my destiny, and my story. And I never looked back, knowing that the echoes of that slap, of that humiliation, would never touch me again. The satisfaction was silent, powerful, and complete.